could be afternoon, could be just about anything here at the ConTech Exec Podcast. But welcome everyone who's listening in, and I want to welcome my new guest, Rishi Srivastava. I do have my Texas accent has a little trouble with that, but I try to work my way around it. Rishi, thank you for being with me today. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you, Robert, for having me.
Yeah, very good. Well, you and I had a conversation. It's been a couple weeks ago now, just about your company, Beiing Human, and talking about like the redundancies of some of the work. I just want to how did you? And I always ask this question: how did you get into this crazy business when we start talking about construction and all the paperwork around it? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I was working at Bank of America, and I was living in Charlotte. I met my good friend Luke. He's a construction CFO, and I was working as an AI engineer at Bank of America as well during that time. I myself was doing a lot of tedious work, looking at one report in PDF and typing stuff into another place, kind of conversion from this unstructured to structured data. And Luke was a very forward, Luke is a very forward thinking CFO, and he and I had a great chat. And he was like, in construction, there is so much labor wastage on these documents, information from, for example, from an invoice, extracting it out and putting it in into an ERP. Such a tedious task for an AP clerk. And some of these companies, they have people, maybe a couple of AP people who are just typing this information in, AP invoice, delivery ticket, credit card receipt, all those documents. So the name of the company, going back to your original question, it came about with the idea that humans are not supposed to be doing these tedious, repetitive tasks that an AI can do. And yeah, that's how it came together.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit below folks, kind of pay grade, I guess, or intelligence grade to be having to. And there's nothing more frustrating than having to do redundant work, like, extra entry. And it also introduces the element of error. As much as smart as we are, right? uh, We are humans and we do
Mhm.
make mistakes and we do tend to lose focus from time to time. I know I am very, very much susceptible to that thing where I lose focus for a little bit, maybe screw a few things up. And I get it. Nobody's adverse from mistakes, but I think getting to where we're at with construction and what we're doing, it's very important to realize that those mistakes cost dollars and cents, right? And they cost time, I guess. And if you're going to relate both of them, time is money, whatever you're going to do, but they tend to compound on one another. Especially, one mistake maybe leads to two, maybe leads to more time, maybe leads to that. And so you just decided one day, okay, well, I'm going to jump out of Bank of America and I'm going to help my friend out, and we're going to talk about this construction industry because I have called people crazy before about getting into this industry because it is so complex. But so is that how it happened? You just said, okay, yeah, I think we can do this.
Yeah, so looks definitely had faced this problem himself, and this industry, like you were saying, it's a very complex industry. Uh, Furthermore, people are not willing to change easily too. You know,
Yeah.
something's working, i- and even if it's working really badly, the risk of change is just sometimes too much for people in this industry.
Yeah, isn't that funny? It's almost like the devil right? It may not be working great, but it's kind of working, and I'm afraid that something else that I might try may not work at all. It seems to be a bit of a superstition almost at some levels. And maybe it's because it's not the background, it's not really a core competency that is within the industry. But a guy like you, coming from like that Silicon Valley uh, mindset. For you, it's like, oh no, no, this should be much easier. So
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for about 4 years now, and first couple of years, people were not even listening to us. It was just so hard to get people to pay attention.
welcome to construction.
Yeah.
So tell me about your Silicon Valley days a little bit. You were kind of in the early, kind of applied AI onset. What did you see? Kind of good, bad, and ugly as you kind of made your way through that.
And Bank of America, we were already implementing things that became very popular around 2022, 2023. Even in 2019, our um, consumer AI domain, we had a chatbot called Erica. I worked on its intent detection and entity detection portion of it. So when you're talking to our chatbot, for example, you say, show me transactions from yesterday. The chatbot needs to figure out what you want to do. It also needs to figure out what are the important things, entities in that kind of question. So developing models for those, and we were developing uh, things that were really tuned for our data set and not too general. ChatGPT or uh, current uh, generative models, they're very general. But we were working on something quite specific to make sure that it worked just for the bank. And during that process from 2019 to 22, I was like, why is this stuff just sitting here at this corner of the bank and why is it not everywhere else?
Yeah.
You know, and
So
that's the kind of mindset that helped me make the jump.
I got you. So, and you bring up an interesting point. Um, the information that you were dealing with at Bank of America was very pointed, right? It's very specific to Bank of America. Just had the information that we posted on. I posted on last week. AECOM just bought Consigli for like
Mhm.
630 billion or some crazy amount, million. I can't remember what it was, but um, basically bought themselves their own AI company to put under there. And then you also read the stuff about Turner, who decided to contract for 2 years with ChatGPT, um, which again, I've commented on it about it being, is it a strategic move? Obviously it is some sort of strategy to move into AI. There's two different schools of thought on how to get there. My concern with either one of those is, kind of current processes, how people are doing things. Kind of like you said, folks wouldn't even talk to us for the first, couple of years about, this kind of stuff, even though it may have been causing them pain.
Mhm.
They couldn't get around it. And I concern myself with this because, data governance is probably one of the biggest things that we have a problem with. People call things different things, and people have different processes, even within the same company. You have different spreadsheets, you have this, that, and the other. Well, I do it this way because I had to solve it this way, and I don't want to move away from it. So, what's your thought on that? I mean, the Chat GPT route, as you said, it's very general. It's very widespread. I mean, are we teaching it things from somebody's blog post? I mean, I know we give a lot of great information here on the ConTech Exec, but I don't necessarily know that you know they should be quoting me on Chat GPT at any point in time in the Turner infrastructure, right? I mean, I don't know that that would be a very wise thing to do. So again, isn't the more detailed the information, the better data governance we have, better for an AI functionality?
Oh yeah, especially for huge organizations like Turner, you don't want uh, like finance P&L showing up in a salesperson's inbox, right? Because the data governance is big in big companies, and who owns the data? How can it be moved from one place to another? What sort of querying you can do on that? Who can actually listen to the uh, reply from the bot on that particular set of data? All that's super important. And going back to that, these acquisitions, these construction companies, the first one that you're talking about, and Sigley getting acquired by a construction company, I kind of, mm, I'm not sure if it's the right move. The construction companies, their core expertise is never technology. I mean, if you're trying to be a technology company, uh, you know, there's fine boundary. Maybe they want to be a technology company, and then because if you're acquiring a company just for yourself, it just Uh, that's probably not the best idea. There's so many other ways to use the money, but maybe you're acquiring it and then you're trying to become a software company yourself and you think that you have the distribution, right? But with ChatGPT and the Turner partnership, it kind of makes sense to me. It's not a kind of Turner is a huge empire we're talking about, right? We're not talking about a small company. And now in US, the SMB market is huge too, right? I mean, under $500 million revenue, there's a lot of companies, and those companies, I mean, they cannot directly get served by OpenAI. And one more thing we have to remember is a lot of time these AI workflows, they need to be very tightly integrated with your current processes. They cannot just come and sit in a silo. How are you gonna make sure that the workflow is flowing post AI adoption?
Yeah, I was concerned about that too with the Chat GPT thing. Somebody using their own GPT that they've created, that becomes siloed information again, unless they then share. It becomes a system GPT, which it's shared amongst people. And is everybody going to use it? The adoption. I always say there's two different things. There's adoption and there's adapting, right? They're not. They may come from the same word, but it's not the same thing. Um, but I kind of want to get into more about being human, and what you guys are doing with the AP side of things. We can talk all day about the way that some folks are trying to adopt, I'll say, AI tools, whether it's the way Turner wants to do it by using a Chat GPT, or whether it's the way that maybe AECOM wants to become a software company. However, but a product like yours, it's a dedicated tool, right? And it's dedicated to helping specific pain point. And I want to talk about that pain point, which is kind of like AP and the redundancies and why is it so expensive? What is going on within those systems that you've discovered that makes it so expensive, and how can AI help?
Yeah. Think about an accounts payable clerk, and maybe they're receiving 500 invoices a month, and they gotta receive their invoice and then type it in the accounting system, get the approval from project managers. Uh, that process itself is very time consuming. Getting one invoice into the system can easily be 5 minutes. So
Well,
we're
and then
talking,
matching it up with a purchase order, right? What if it doesn't have a purchase order number on it, right?
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there is just so many scenarios, PO number missing, like you were saying. Maybe it needs to be also lined up with a delivery ticket. We also tackle that, right? So how do you make sure that there was a delivery against that AP invoice that you're ready to pay for? And one aspect that a lot of times gets missed is the approvals from the project managers. The current systems, they're not web-based, pretty much. We're talking about old ERPs in like built in 20, 30 years ago, and their UX is quite old, and a lot of times people are doing data entry, and then when things get into a bad uh, part of the workflow, for example, the project manager rejects an invoice. Maybe it was not for his job. And now suddenly that part of the workflow is not very well handled in the old ERPs. And the information, a lot of times it gets lost deep inside these complicated interfaces. That's where another opportunity was there for us to make sure that information flow amongst various teams, field, project management, and accounting was happening smoothly in AP. It was not just about getting the data typed in and matched properly. It was also seamless collaboration amongst various parties here.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I remember again back in my good old days of running projects and getting invoices that were incorrect. So the invoice number was the same. It's all there. It's all in the system, but it's incorrect. So then you've got to change it. And if not everybody is in the same loop, right? They're going to be seeing maybe in the system it gets duplicated somehow. Like, oh, there was this invoice, but then they sent me this invoice and this invoice. Which one is the real invoice? Because there were changes made to it. And so I remember specifically sitting with AP clerk and sitting there with them going, okay, this one is the correct one. We had to change here, here, and here. And and those systems, again, like you said, we didn't have an integrated system where everybody could be on the same page or be notified of changes made to specific invoices, purchase orders, documents, anything like that. And one small change can really throw a wrench into the whole works, because then it may look like you only have, it may look like you have three invoices, but you actually have one. And it gets very, very confusing, and which one gets paid, and it looks like you have approved them. And if you don't all have all of that together in a work order, especially an organized or like a workflow, especially an organized workflow, you end up in trouble very, very quickly.
Very well said. One more thing we've observed is the cash flow visibility. A lot of times, these AP invoices, they're sitting outside of the system. People are having all these folders on their Windows machine, and the PMs are approving in these folders, and the controller or CFO has no real clue about the liability they're holding for 30 plus days, until people get to code it, and get it into the system.
Right, that's another thing. It's the notification of what is changing within the system as it happens.
Hmm.
It's to your point. It's kind of real time, because it's important for a CFO or controller to know, oh, hey, by the way, this is cash going out and this is when it's going out. Oh no, did that change? Oh, okay. Well, how much cash was it that's going out? I'm just talking from the AP side. I'm not even talking about from the accounts receivable side, because I think it's probably much of the same thing there, where, oh yeah, by the way, they were supposed to pay us, on this date, and now we're not going to see it until this date according to such and such, right? And
Hmm.
again, one mistake, one mishap throws a wrench into the entire process, because not only do you have to focus on that problem, right? But you've got 50 others that are going to come in this week that may have the same situation. So tell me a bit more about how Beiing Human kind of does some of the heavy lifting.
One main thing it does is the progress on AP process. It's available to all the interested parties at real time. As the changes are happening, the AP is getting the information into the system. PM is approving it or rejecting it. All that flow is happening seamlessly. And audit trail, the life cycle of this transaction, right when the first time the AP invoice came into your inbox, there's a lot of things happening. People are coding it. There's approval, rejections happening. Maybe someone got attaching a delivery ticket. Maybe you're assigning some approvers, or there was some issues with the uh, vendor's invoice ID. All that stuff is getting logged, and people can see that in the audit trail. Maybe this invoice took a total 1 week to get processed through our system, but meanwhile, everything that was happening with this invoice, all the conversation is centralized, you know. And one more thing we do is uh, Q&A on the documents. So, and let's say an AP invoice lands into the inbox of the accounts payable person. They have no clue sometimes whose invoice is it, right? They don't even have a good starting point. So they can ask questions around that particular invoice instead of starting to route it randomly to various people and try to figure out whose invoice that is.
The kind of the chain of command almost on who's in charge of this budget, this amount of money,
Mhm.
those types of things. I got to thinking about that. I think again, notification of what's happening with certain files is a big deal, but then it's that redundant factor. Guys, are you guys utilizing your system to basically create? Does a PO start in your system, or is it something that starts the PO starts in the ERP where it kind of should be? You know, that's main financial, and you guys are just monitoring that system and making sure that once it's in there, then now it can transfer easily into its next stage and match up with the invoice. Is that how that works?
So our customers, sometimes they have POs in the ERP, sometimes they don't. Some of our customers don't even have POs. They just deal with AP invoice. They're just maybe not there in their maturation life cycle. Maybe 10 to 15 billion in revenue. They just have not gone through the PO process. But some others have POs too. When you have like around 50 million or 16 plus revenue, that's when POs and all these controls become very important. So for that type of scenario, the customers can create the POs in the ERP. Sometimes there is this purchasing system that they have,
Mm-hmm.
where that is the one that takes care of all the purchasing and pushes the information into the ERP. But if the customer doesn't have that kind of purchasing system, or they're just creating in the ERP, that's okay too. Uh, One more thing we do for some of our customers is actually create the PO too. Let's say the vendor is giving you a quote, you just bought out of this job. You can start with this vendor quote or field order from a field person, and you can let the AI read that and code it and push it to the ERP too.
I gotcha. So the AI layer basically acts as that communication layer that's missing um, within the current system, or can't even perform on its own.
So for us, the AI layer is mostly a data transformation layer. So when you look at the AP invoice PDF or relief ticket a PDF, a human can look at all this information. How do we translate into a structured format, a JSON that can be read by an ERP? That's the main AI layer we have. We have a small amount of other AI layers. For example, um, we have a chatbot which can help you navigate our question if you have any questions about our system. That's another AI system. Mainly, if you think about our system, we are just converting unstructured to structured data, and that conversion, it has to be template agnostic too, because different vendors have different type of AP invoices. They don't all look the same. If you have to start setting up the vendor templates, that's gonna be very messy, and our AI uh, does that very well. And one more piece to that I'm gonna add to it is validation layer. How are you going to validate AI's work very well? And we've spent a lot of time developing a statistical user interface whereby you can easily see where the information is coming from in this document through our user interface.
All right. Is that what you call responsible AI when you're talking to folks about? Is that
Yeah, that's the right way to think about it. Yeah, I mean, how are you going to validate this AI's work? That's always a question anyone should who's considering AI uh, in their current processes need to think about it.
Yeah, well, hey, that's a great point. I've talked about it several times on the podcast here, which is you can't treat AI in its current state as plug and play, right? You have to treat it as kind of a new admin or a new project engineer. You definitely have to check its work because it's not perfect, and I don't know that it ever will be perfect. I had a conversation the other day to thinking about large language models. Are large language models kind of capped out? Are because there's a lot of talk about that in AI circles, how LLMs may not necessarily be our best path forward when we talk about the overall overarching topic of artificial intelligence, right? Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a better engine. I wonder what you thought about that.
You know, if you're thinking about artificial general intelligence, AGI, I don't think LLMs are the path. I mean, these things are just as statistical parrots in some ways. I mean, they can talk very well, but they don't have a very good understanding of the outside world. Physical intelligence, they lack big time. Also, they're a lot of times just responding to you, trying to cooperate with you. They're not trying to get really at odds with you. Whatever you say, they're gonna uh, reverberate back to you the
Yeah.
same in sort of sense.
Yeah, they're too nice.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love the word they use. They're trying to cooperate with you. And I think that's important to note. And it's important to note that. It's like, again, if you get on some of these, especially when we're talking about like LLMs, ChatGPT, that's what I was worried about a little bit with, like Turner's idea of, we're going to give everybody in our company or whoever, however many folks they're giving it to, I don't know. But for the next 2 years, we're really going to let them develop their own, GPTs and see what that develops. I was reading, I don't know if the statistics are true or if the numbers are true, but they've already developed some 400, different, I'll say agentic type. I don't know if there's true agentic layers, but agentic type GPTs amongst their current staff. And again, I need to do some better research into that. But then I start to worry about those things because, as to your point, they may not necessarily be they're really smart, but they're maybe too cooperative, right? They want to, I don't know, they want the attaboy kind of thing. It's almost, oh, I don't want to upset you and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but yeah, let's try that instead, even though it may, again, reasoning, I guess, is one thing that we're missing in all of this thing. Statistically, we can say that a statistic is not a reason for something, right? A statistic says, well, over the last 10 years, we've seen this result 70% of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that may not directly apply to your query, whatever that is, but I'm going to tell you, well, this worked for this, so let's. But again, we don't have a one-size-fits-all type of world.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the biggest stumbling block for artificial intelligence, especially in the construction industry, because there's nothing about the construction industry is that one size fits all. We have several layers of, parallel processes, right? Everybody, we've got some framing involved. We're going to hang some steel. We're going to pour some concrete, but there's so many different variables within that. I don't care whether it's weather, location, altitude, those types of things all affect how well and how productive we are in a construction business. Like that's just the construction portion. I'm not even talking about the stuff that we're talking about here about getting the bills paid, right? How many hands are touching certain products and materials before it ever even gets to the job site? How much paperwork we've got to go through to get there? Let's not even get into the pre-construction phase, right, of how well we're estimating this project, how well we're doing on these. So there's so many different real-world variables that I don't know that artificial intelligence in itself is certainly at this level able to handle such things. I don't know if it's a good idea to use a predictability module on something like this.
Yeah, I mean, you have some valid concerns. One big thing is that you gotta treat it as an assistant. It's not your boss. Its verdict is not never final.
Yeah. I think, and it comes down to this. It leads to a whole new level of. I don't want to say it's supposed to relieve stress. Like when they talk about AI, when we talk about utilizing it, I don't care where you're using it, whether you're using it at Bank of America, or you're using it at Turner Construction, or you're using it anywhere. I don't care. You're being a mom and pop shop down the street. There's a different sort of stress now. It's supposed to aid you in your process of thinking. In some ways it does. Sometimes I think it might maybe we can't let go of our critical thinking, right? So now we've got a different stress layer. We don't have the stress layer of going, am I thinking about this correctly? What now we have is, um, I'm looking at it this way. My AI assistant over here is looking at it this other way. Is this the correct path, right? And leadership is expecting, if you work for somebody and you're utilizing AI, leadership is expecting that to be investigated as well. They want to know, well, how did you arrive at this answer? Um, so you mentioned, leaders drowning as AI scales faster than governance does, and I think I want you to kind of address that because I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, and it cannot be an afterthought governance, right? I mean, we kind of have to know that uh, at the very outset, this thing where the data governance is going to be big, um, has to be kept in mind right at the outset. Like when you're talking about a big project, right? Let's say you and I are building a big building, right? We cannot be thinking about the very last step of uh, building that building when we are there. We have to think about it like right at the very inception of it, when we maybe even when you are estimating it, right? So data governance is just like that. It has to be thought right at the very inception of the project.
And it has to
And,
be used throughout by everyone.
Mhm.
So data governance is just that. And I know it's a big word, and a lot of people's. I mean, I know when I first heard it, I wanted to fall asleep because again, it's not something that you. It's it's not an exciting process. But I think to you, in this term, I almost consider it the rules of language, how we speak to our AI agent, our artificial intelligence, how we speak to it has to be consistent, and it has to be structured, right? Because it's not any different than you and I speaking different languages. I wouldn't be able to understand what you're saying because I don't know your language. I don't know those rules, right?
Mhm.
Just the same thing as you understand, you've learned English and you probably have a second language, right? We have different rules for English than you
Mhm.
do for your native language, those types of things. And I see it as the same problem with AI. I mean, early on, people started talking about, early on, they're talking about the system, the prompting. Prompt engineering is the new thing. I think it's a bold word to say that you're engineering some sort of prompt, but most people don't understand what that means.
Mhm.
But that's all part of this governance package. And then when you say governance package, a lot of people just tune out. But it is the most important thing, I think, as we enter into this, what we say, age of AI. It is the most important thing that we can talk about is let's communicate properly with it so that we're not creating confusion from the beginning of this.
Yeah, yeah.
So does this create new roles within companies, do you think?
It definitely does. You know, we live in a world where people are not fully uh, ready to adopt the technology, and there has to be s- of at least a few people in an organization who are thinking about data governance. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then if they're thinking about it, they have to be able to teach it because again, you've got, you know, just like somebody who is a translator, it has to be able to translate. You have to be able to take somebody's information and say, okay, this needs to translate into this to get the proper output. Let's talk about, kind of future of work. Everyone says AI is going to redefine the work, but what actually does that mean for what you think it means for a superintendent or a PM or an administrator or somebody like that? What does this do for these folks?
One thing it does is there's always an assistant available to help you, no matter the date, the time, the venue, as long as you have a good internet connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they have some edge AIs too, but they're not probably as good as the um, Claudio AI. Personally, for me, when I think about it, I use these models so often, Gemini, GPT. The other day, this weekend actually, I was working on a voice to text model for construction noise and construction kind of text. Um, like let's say you're in a field and you're doing some sort of let's say daily reporting at the end of the day. So this model throughout the day you talk to it in voice, and at the end of the day it just creates uh, the daily log, right? And to build that kind of model, somebody like me, a couple of years ago, it would have taken me a month, you know. And to get to a good starting point, it just took me a couple of days. You know, I just started with Whisper, and then used the coding AI agent with Gemini, and I started asking, give me the synthetic data for a construction job site so that I can start training this voice to text model. It gave me the code, and then it gave me the way to test it, and it gave me a strategy how we can uh, go from here, build an MVP, and get a fully functional construction ASR, right? So the progress, in my view, that has been really significant is in coding. You know Actually, software programming has been disrupted hugely in last 2, 3 years because these AI models are very good at coding.
Yeah. So I hear the same things. I hear the same things, and it does make me again. We were talking earlier about how companies, the consigli um, topic. Well, does AECom want to be um, a construction company, or are they trying to be a technology company? Are they trying to pull some vertical out of technology that they specifically use? I don't know what they're trying to do, but again, this framework, this kind of example, I guess, and leads other people to believe, well, it's so easy for you. It sounds so easy for you to develop these models and develop my own software. Why don't I just do it in house? And then we lose focus, right? Because the things that I worry about probably aren't the Turners of the world or the AECons of the world, those kind of folks. I'm not worried about them. They already have departments that are 12 times larger than any company I've probably worked for, or my own company when I ran it. But what I'm thinking about is these mid-sized contractors who, at some point, are probably going to need some sort of digital proof that they are competent and skilled in providing what's needed. Meaning they've got a digital track record of their safety. They've got a digital track record of paying their bills on time. They've got a digital track record, uh, and I'm saying it's a performance track record. And you the, not only are we as construction personnel and construction people getting educated on the benefits of digitization, but clients and people who are buying product, buying buildings, building things, doing those kind of things, they're also getting very well educated on what's possible. And I don't see it being too long before you've got to come to the table with, I'll call it, a digital receipt of your performance. Um, that has an impact on not only contracts, it has an impact on pre-construction, it has an impact on construction scheduling, it has an impact on closeout, everywhere across the board. But you'll have to provide some sort of, digital proof of concept or proof of performance. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and one thing I think is changing really fast is the amount of digital information we're acquiring. And construction, at the same time, it tends to lag behind almost every technology wave, right? So, uh, I mean, there's a technology called blockchain which can do some of the things that you're talking about very well, right? I'm not sure whether you were alluding to that or not. Uh, People need to realize, and I'm sure you are talking to people like that too, that change is happening, and we as society have progressed so much over the last, 100, 200 years because we were willing to adapt to the change, right? I want to go back to that point you're making about uh, like a construction company acquiring, let's say, an AI company, right? Uh, you know, one fundamental tenet of our society's big success has been division of labor, right? I mean, if I'm good at coding and you are good at, let's say, mm, building buildings, I mean, why don't we just focus on what we are good at and we exchange, right? Instead of you and I trying to do the same thing, maybe I acquire your company and try to start building buildings too, and I kind of dilutes my focus. There's 6 billion of us and in this world, right? And if everyone starts to do do a lot of things, suddenly the quality of product that's going to be out in the market is not going to be high enough.
Yeah, specialization,
Hmm.
being proficient at your craft, whatever that is. Um, I do worry about that becoming maybe as you diluted, right? Because what is it? Sometimes enough information will make you dangerous. It doesn't make you proficient, but it makes you dangerous because you know enough about it to maybe perform in the space, but you don't know enough about it to understand what the outcome means.
Yeah.
I think that's a
And
I think that's important as we are humans, right? And I think that gets back to your even just the title of your whole company, the name of your company, Being Human. We've got to keep the human element involved in this and still understand, you know, we need this, right? We need not only folks that understand the use of AI, but we still need people that upskill at plumbing, welding, all of those things. We need those specialties because I guarantee you there's not a tech guy out there that's going to be able to then jump out from behind the computer to go, weld a nice bead on an oil pipeline.
yeah, that's a different skill set. And the tech guy is counting on the plumber to be able to do that, right? And the plumber is counting on the tech guy to be able to create good software for him, right?
Yeah. Well, I all of these things concern me when I start to think about construction because I do think about the some 500,000 jobs that will go unfilled. It was this year, it was the same number it was last year as it was the year before. You know, we're rapidly losing what I'll call tribal knowledge about certain things, important things, whether they be
Mhm.
electricians, plumbers, welders. And these aren't the folks that are going to be utilizing what we think is AI. But I get a little nervous when I hear the pundits start to talk about how AI is going to help us transform maybe a labor shortage or anything like that. And I don't see it. I I see where it can save time for doing redundant activities, maybe within the office structure or, those types of things, getting them so they're not waiting on something and keeping them busy. That's a productivity standard, but that's not a scalable, um, people standard. So I do worry about that.
I think one important thing is the physical AI. That revolution is coming to next 10 years. Right now in San Francisco, Waymo and Tesla, they are having driverless cars running everywhere, right? So
Hmm.
there's a whole plethora of people who are relying on being able to drive the cars and make their livings. Their job's going to go away in next 5 to 10 years
Yeah.
because that technology is coming. It's hard to say that what can be automated and what cannot be automated. Personally, don't see people being able to automate like a plumbing job, maybe a robot doing plumbing work. I can't imagine that happening anytime soon, you know. But again, we really don't know how far this is going to go in next, when however many years, 20, 25 years.
Yeah. Well, I think that always begs the question, and it's a good one. Is I can't remember who said it, but it's not about what you can invent, but whether you should invent it.
Mm.
is always the question for science in itself, right? Obviously, sky's the limit on what can be invented, but the question is, for the sake of human race or the sake of the humankind, is should we do it, right? Should we be trying? Should these efforts, be traveled? One thing I wanted to ask you before we kind of wrap up here is if you got what's one thing right now every construction leader should do probably this month to prepare for AI without spending a dime? Like, what should they be doing? This month, a good piece of advice for just this month, or maybe Q1.
Yeah. Listening to quality information, including your podcast, right? We're talking about great stuff here. A lot of times we or even construction leaders underestimate the importance of education.
Yes, I agree with that. Very good. That's good advice. I come from the Warren Buffett school of, try to read something, read as much as you possibly can, get as much of an education as you can. And I'm not talking about, asking a question to ChatGPT either. I'm actually talking about getting out there, maybe getting a book in your hands or getting a book on tape, listen to some podcasts, get some different point of views going, really educate yourself on what's out there. I know there's not a lot of time in the day, but there is, maybe there's drive time. Maybe there's, 15 minutes a night. It doesn't take that much, but it does incrementally increase, to us for us to educate ourselves on these things. So I think that's great advice. Great advice. Rishi, it's been fantastic. Time flies when you're having fun and you're, chatting about these things. I really appreciate your insights. And how can folks get a hold of you and get a hold of Beiing Human?
We're active on LinkedIn. So the company's name is Beiing Human, BEIING space HUMAN. Our website is beinghuman.com. Again, being with two eyes. My email is rishi@beinghuman.com, rishi@BEIINGHUMAN.com. Yeah, those are the good channels.
Very good. Well, folks, I will put all that information into the show notes. We're going to be publishing this obviously on Spotify for your drive time listeners. If you like the video versions of these things, I also have it on my YouTube channel. But Rishi, thanks so much for joining me this week. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye.